I never thought owning a private island would come with its own kind of nightmare. I imagined peace, the soft waves brushing the shore, birds in the trees, complete isolation. A place where I could truly escape the chaos of the mainland. But all of that changed the day HOA Karen stepped onto my property. And when I say stepped onto my property, I don't mean politely knocking on a gate or even sending a warning. I mean she basically stormed in with a clipboard, a hard glare, and an attitude that screamed, "I'm in charge here." It started like a whisper, a rumor that seemed almost too absurd to be true. Neighbors called, some laughing nervously on the phone saying, "Did you hear? HOA Karen is building cabins on your island?" I chuckled at first. There was no way someone could just waltz onto private property and start construction. I had all the deeds, the surveys, the paperwork, you name it. This was my island, legally, undeniably. But then I saw it with my own eyes. From my small boat, approaching the island for a routine inspection, I saw them teeny structures popping up across the landscape like mushrooms after a rainstorm. 16 of them. 16 perfectly rectangular, identical cabins. Each one spaced too neatly to be natural, too purposeful to be anything other than planned. My stomach sank. I didn't even need to dock to know this wasn't some innocent development mistake. This was deliberate. Someone had invaded my sanctuary. I tried to approach calmly at first. I always like to think I'm reasonable, that people make mistakes, that maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe she had permission from some other body. Maybe there was a paperwork error. But even from a distance, her presence radiated arrogance. She was there, clipboard in hand, supervising a crew that didn't bother to look at me as I pulled up. When I called out, her head turned slowly, and that smirk appeared, the one that says, "You're powerless here." I remember stepping onto the dock and just freezing for a moment, taking it all in. The cabins were fully framed, some already with walls up, nails sticking out, sawdust blowing in the wind. Each cabin was a silent insult, a testament to someone thinking they could just bulldoze their will into my life. My first reaction was disbelief, the kind that makes your jaw ache because your mouth is open, but your brain refuses to form words. I wanted to scream to confront her, but part of me knew that storming in without a plan would only play into her hands. She thrived on intimidation. I had to stay strategic. So I did what any rational property owner would do. I called my attorney. And while waiting, I tried talking to her directly. I walked up, hands raised in what I hoped was a calm, non-threatening manner, and asked, "What are you doing here?" Her response? A slow, deliberate look, then the most infuriating smile, and the words that would echo in my head for weeks. "These cabins are exactly what the island needs. Don't worry about permission. That's just bureaucracy." Bureaucracy. I laughed, but it wasn't a funny laugh. It was the kind that starts in your chest and rattles out, trembling. This was my property, my island. And she was calling my legal rights bureaucracy. I won't lie. The next few hours were a blur. I ran around the island, taking pictures, documenting every cabin, every worker, every illegal act, every piece of lumber, every blueprint nailed to a tree, every stack of shingles. It was all evidence. And I needed evidence. Because I knew Karen wouldn't back down without a fight. This wasn't just about cabins. This was about power, control, and a sense of entitlement that had no place on my land. That night, I sat in my little cabin, overlooking the water, tried to make sense of it all. 16 cabins. Each one a blatant violation. Each one an escalation of something that had started months before. With HOA complaints about fences, landscaping, even the color of my boat. I thought HOA conflicts were petty squabbles. I thought I had seen it all. But this was a war. And she had just crossed a line that could never be UNCRO said by morning. I realized this wasn't just about stopping construction. It was about sending a message, loud and clear. I would not be intimidated. I would not be bullied. And I would not lose my island. I called the county, the building authorities, and yes, even the police. And while bureaucracy can be slow, the first visit from local officials confirmed what I feared. They didn't have permission either. No permits. No approvals. Just 16 illegal structures on my private land. But Karen wasn't finished. That's the thing about people like her. They escalate. By the afternoon, she had called a local news station, spinning the story as if I was the unreasonable one. The island is being underutilized, she said. We're bringing progress and community development. Progress? Community. I looked at the cabins again, and I realized they weren't just illegal. They were a statement, a proclamation that she could rewrite reality to suit her desires. And this is where it got personal. Because property disputes aren't just about land, they're about identity. About respect. About knowing that your life, your choices, your sanctuary can be disregarded by someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. And Karen? She wanted me to know she didn't care. I spent the next week in a whirlwind of meetings, calls, and documents. Each conversation with an official felt like I was building a case in a courtroom drama. I collected photographs, blueprints, emails, and messages from neighbors. Some neighbors were supportive, some afraid, some downright amused that HOA drama had made it to an island. But all of it fueled my determination. I wasn't going to let this slide. One morning, I returned to the island with my camera, hoping to catch Karen in the act of overseeing the workers. I got more than I bargained for. She was standing on a small hill, arms crossed, shouting at a crew member over a misaligned beam. And when she saw me filming, her expression shifted for a split-second surprise. Then that familiar smirk, as if daring me to do something about it. And I realized right then that this story wasn't going to end with calm negotiation. This was going to be a showdown. A battle between legality and audacity. Between one person's rights and another person's sense of entitlement. That's when I made the decision. I would not just call authorities. I would not just document. I would fight. Every cabin, every nail, every inch of construction would become evidence in a case that would make HOA Karen think twice before ever stepping onto someone's property again. And I knew this fight would be long, messy, and exhausting. But if I didn't fight, the message would be clear that islands, no matter how private, were fair game for anyone with a clipboard and a sense of power. By the end of that week, the island looked like a battlefield. Sawdust everywhere, cabins half-built, workers confused, and Karen. She was still standing there like a general who thought the war was already hers. But she hadn't counted on me being just as stubborn. On me knowing the law, on me being ready to take every step necessary to protect what was mine, and that's when the real story began, the story of legal battles, confrontations, and the eventual justice I had to fight tooth and nail for. The story of how 16 cabins, illegally built on my private island, turned into one of the most audacious HOA battles anyone could imagine. I still remember the moment I realized this wasn't just about cabins anymore. This was about reclaiming control, standing up to entitlement, and making sure that no one, not even a Karen with HOA credentials, could trample over someone else's life without consequences. And trust me, the events that followed would shock anyone who thought HOA disputes were small-town annoyances. The island looked like chaos, the unfinished cabins, scattered tools, sawdust everywhere. But the real chaos wasn't just the physical mess. It was the storm that had taken hold of my mind, the adrenaline, the anger, and that unshakable determination to reclaim my sanctuary. I knew I couldn't let Karen get away with this, not today. Not ever. The next morning I returned with my lawyer. Seeing Karen standing there, clipboard in hand, smirking like she owned the place, I felt a mixture of anger and amusement. This was at the moment where words met reality. I confronted her calmly but firmly. You have no permits. This is private property. You are trespassing? Her response? That same infuriating grin paired with a dismissive wave. The island could be so much more. You're holding it back. I wanted to scream, but my lawyer stepped in, and suddenly the tone shifted. Papers were exchanged, regulations were quoted, and slowly, her smirk faltered. That's when I realized Karen may have thought she could intimidate me. But she had never faced someone willing to fight every single step. We spent the next few days documenting every cabin, every beam, every corner of illegal construction. I walked the island like a detective, cataloging everything. Photographs, videos, GPS coordinates, timestamps, nothing would slip past me. Every cabin became a piece of a puzzle that told a very simple story. Karen ignored the law, ignored my rights, and assumed she could act with impunity. Then came the confrontation that changed everything. Karen tried to rally the workers, to insist that the cabins were approved and that I was overreacting. But when officials from the county arrived, permits in hand or rather, the complete lack thereof, their reaction was immediate. Work had to stop. And in that moment, I saw the arrogance in Karen's eyes crack just slightly. That was all I needed, but Karen wasn't finished. She doubled down, attempting to spin the story on social media, painting me as the villain. The property owner refuses progress, she claimed. The cabins are community-friendly structures. I stared at the screen, incredulous. 16 illegal cabins. No permits. And yet here she was, spinning a narrative as if she was some hero of development. It was audacious, infuriating, and exactly the proof I needed that her motives weren't about community, they were about control and entitlement. With my attorney's guidance, we filed a formal complaint, initiating a process that would eventually involve fines, legal orders, and the complete removal of every single cabin. It was a tedious process, and every day felt like a battle of wills. Karen tried to delay, to manipulate, to find loopholes, but the law was on my side, and that law became my shield. Finally, the day came when the authorities returned with orders. Karen watched as crews began dismantling the cabins, piece by piece. The sound of hammers and saws was oddly satisfying, a soundtrack of justice. I stood there, watching each structure come down, feeling a mix of relief, vindication, and disbelief that this nightmare had finally turned toward resolution. But the best moment, the one I'll never forget, was seeing Karen herself confronted by the county officials. No smirk this time, no arrogance, just stunned silence. I knew then that she had realized, maybe for the first time, that there are consequences for audacity, for entitlement, and for trampling over someone else's life. That moment, frozen in my memory, felt like a victory, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever been threatened or bullied by someone abusing power. As the last cabin was removed, and the island slowly returned to its natural, peaceful state, I walked along the shore, feeling the wind, the sun on my face, the soft lap of water. My private island, my sanctuary, was finally mine again. And I realized something important. The fight wasn't just about land. It was about asserting boundaries, demanding respect, protecting what's yours even when someone powerful thinks they can take it. Looking back, can't say the experience was easy. It was stressful, exhausting, and emotionally draining. There were moments I doubted myself, moments I wondered if Karen would ever stop, moments I feared the island might never feel safe again. But in the end, persistence, preparation, and a refusal to be intimidated won. Justice wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. And now, every time I step onto the island, every time I see the untouched shoreline, the clear water, and the trees swaying in the breeze, I remember that fight. I remember the audacity of one person trying to rewrite reality and the power of standing firm. That island isn't just a piece of land. It's a testament to resilience, to courage, and to the idea that entitlement can be challenged and defeated. So, if you ever think HOA disputes are small, petty, or harmless, think again. They can escalate in ways you never imagine. But remember this: being prepared, documenting everything, standing your ground, and knowing your rights can turn a terrifying situation into a story of justice. My private island may have been threatened, but in the end, it remains Manand. HOA Karen learned the hard way that you cannot build 16 cabins on someone else's life without consequences. Walking along the shore that evening, watching the sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not just the kind of peace that comes from isolation, but the kind that comes from victory, from justice, and from knowing that no matter how audacious someone is, boundaries exist, they can be enforced. This story is a reminder, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever faced someone like HOA Karen. Stand firm. Fight smart and protect what's yours. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your life and your island is to face the storm head on. Document every move and never let entitlement go unchecked. And when that storm finally passes, the victory is sweeter than any sunset. It's clearer than any water and more satisfying than anything I could have imagined.